Hey, this is Chris, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about market crashes because we've had one this year and I've now lived through 3 of them. So I wanted to share some of the things I've learnt from 3 market crashes. Now, the first market crash I lived through was the 2000 tech bubble burst. This was the steepest market fall I've ever seen. In about a year, the NASDAQ, which is the US tech index, fell by 80%. And as a young trader, I'd made a lot of money trading tech shares in the lead up to this, and unfortunately lost almost all of it in the year after. The big lesson I really learned from that market crash was to always lock in some of your gains. No one ever lost money taking a profit, as I later found out as a trader, and so it makes sense if you've made a lot of money in one area to lock some in. You know, the same can be said for people that made a lot of money in cryptocurrency a few years ago. A lot of them regret not having locked in some of that profit. So as markets rise and you make a lot of money, just lock some in, put it away, put it into cash or into a diversified portfolio. You're not going to regret it later, even if you keep on making money. So the second market crash I lived through was the 2008 financial crisis. I'd actually just started as a trader at UBS, and so I got to see it from the perspective of a professional trader. The big lesson I think I learned that year was that markets can always fall much further than you expect. The 2008 financial crisis was the biggest market crash I've lived through. The Australian market and the US share market both fell by over 50%, which is enormous and probably the biggest crash most people around today have ever lived through. What I learned from that crash was to always expect that markets can fall further than you can expect, and therefore you need to make sure you have a strategy that can withstand that. It also is a reason why you really don't want to be leveraged when you invest, because any money that you're borrowing to invest can be lost very quickly and it can entirely wipe out your portfolio when markets crash. So own some defensive assets so you can withstand big market falls, and always have in the back of your mind that markets can fall by 50%, because that will make sure that you're invested for the long run and you have a portfolio that can withstand it. And then the final crash that I've lived through so far, at least, is the 2020 COVID crash. Now, this was the fastest market crash I've ever seen, and it was about equivalent to the famous 1987 crash. In 2 months, or less than 2 months in 2020, the market fell by 35% in Australia, and in other markets by even more. An enormous crash by any standards. And there are a few good lessons I think you can learn from this year's crash. First of all, it is that no one can really predict market crashes, and every crash happens for a different reason. Tech shares being overvalued was the first one. The leverage caused by mortgages in the US was the second one. And this crisis was actually a health crisis that caused markets to fall. One of the things that crises have in common is that no one really predicts them. That's what causes them to lead to big market falls very quickly. If everyone's predicting something, it tends to already be built into the price and probably isn't something you need to worry about. So always be worried about the things that nobody's thinking about, and therefore realize that it's very difficult to predict crashes. So make sure you've got a portfolio that can withstand a crash. Ideally have some money put aside that's ready to invest if there's a market crash, or at least be in a position to rebalance your portfolio out of some of the defensive assets into some of the good long-term growth assets if there's a crash, so you can actually take advantage of it. So overall, I think there are a lot of lessons to learn from crashes. I'd love to hear what you've learned from market crashes, so please reply in the comments below. And I hope you've learned something from a lot of the pain I've suffered in market crashes over the years. If you'd like to see videos that are similar to this, please hit the subscribe button below. I'm posting on this channel twice a week.